Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Rumpistol, Nebula. Alright, here we go. Got a new project from Danish producer and pianist Rumpistol. Not Norwegian, by the way. I don't know how I screwed that up last time I covered him. He is from Denmark. This guy's been at it since the early 2000s, and I've already done a full discography review on him, which you can find a link to in the description. As a quick recap for those who are not familiar with this artist, this guy started out making very warm, comfy, glitchy, and tactile IDM blends with mild electroacoustic elements that very much exemplify the sound you'd expect out of IDM artists from that particular era. He does have one legit classic from that period in his third album, Dynamo, from 2008, which still holds up as excellent. All of the points at which I started to become a lot more in-depth a fan of his was ironically when he started to lean away from IDM altogether and move into straight modern classical and jazz territory for a trilogy of very minimal and downbeat, mostly piano-driven records, with 2020's After the Flood, 2022's Isola, and 2023's Going Inside. Now, After the Flood and Isola totally floored me with a level of emotional complexity and sharp melodic instincts that I didn't feel were present to the same degree on his IDM work, and have become some of my favorite and most heavily replayed albums of the entire 2020s decade so far, regardless of genre. Isola in particular is one of the vanishingly rare times I knew I had a 9 out of 10 album on my hands as I was reviewing it brand new, instead of it growing on me to that level after the fact. One of only 3 to do that so far this decade, along with The Avalanche's We Will Always Love You and Ski Mask's Pool. The third album in the trilogy, Going Inside, was admittedly not nearly as consistently strong as the other two. Some parts of it felt like he was rehashing ideas from the previous 2 albums and not doing them as well, and other parts just felt a little on the fillerish side, but it still had moments that could go toe-to-toe with the best parts of the other 2, and it had an overarching more positive and meditative vibe that was not made redundant by the other 2. It's still a very good album in its own right, if just not on the phenomenal level of its predecessors. But now that this Rumpistol piano trilogy has come to a close, it seems he's ready to find new frontiers. I was personally interested in the idea of him possibly combining the styles of his earlier IDM work with his more recent classical and jazz work. Though this latest album, Nebula, isn't quite what I expected either. This album shows him really doubling down on the jazz direction and working with a full live jazz ensemble. Something which might sound more surprising to some than others. As far as his solo work, jazz may only be an obvious influence on Isola, though he has also regularly worked as part of a 4-piece abstract electro-jazz band called Kalaha for years before that, so this is far from out of nowhere. But what really sets Nebula apart from anything else I've heard from Rumpistol is the way it gets much bigger, more epic and hard-hitting with these sounds. It has more heaviness, forcefulness, and propulsion than possibly anything he's ever made, including Dynamo, and of course centering all of it around cosmic imagery with some 70s synth pioneer and even mild prog and space rock influences. This album is like if you amped up the sound and style of Isola by combining it with the sound of something like Tangerine Dream's Force Majeure. It's easily the most his music has lived up to the energy of what his stage name means. By the way, the name Rumpistol is derived from the fact that rum is the Danish word for space, so rum pistol, space gun. So yeah, to fit with that, this is the most epic sci-fi ready material he's made to date. Which I am all here for. This kind of thing is absolutely my shit. Now, you can pretty much just end the review right there if you wanted. Rumpistol's Isola meets The Comet is Coming styled cosmic jazz and Tangerine Dream's Force Majeure is all you really need to know about this album. I think it's a premise that is just able to speak for itself. It's exactly as cool to listen to as it sounds like it would be on paper, and I can confirm this is another properly great addition to the Rumpistol catalog. Though obviously this is a full video review, so I can talk about minor details too. First of all, I can mark the album's opener Ascension as pretty awesome and living up to its title, starting with all these subtle synth arpeggios that get more and more well layered and building up to a drop of heavy, slow live drums, thick buzzing synth bass, dramatic piano chords, and saxophone solos. really clues you into the kind of ride you'll be sent on, and I really like how the album sort of brings the same idea around full circle for the closer Airborne Again as well, providing the same mix of ingredients for a new tune that I keep matching up with the Bonobo track Light Pattern in my mind. Feels like that sample could go together well with this tune if you slowed it down and layered it on top. And there's plenty of other bangers to go around. The title track builds from blaring bursts of bass and synth cascades into propulsive 80s, not really drum and bass beats. Also a few little digressions into somber violin solos for extra flavor. Celestial Awe is a particular highlight, with its crashing live drums and thick bass contrasting well with the delicate pianos and expansive woodwind section playing big epic chords sometimes. And possibly my favorite track on the album might be the near 8-minute centerpiece, Above the Horizon, which is kind of like a John Hopkins Immunity style epic banger that builds shuffling house and garage influenced beats and stabbing bass lines next to pianos and bright major key melodic synth riffs, though there's also live drumming and light strings and chimes to give it more of an organic flavor too. The album also makes sure to have its more tender and peaceful emotional moments too. See the brief full return to the modern classical tone of his last 3 albums with the piano strings and flutes on Tralfamadore, or the way he builds similarly tender arrangements out of far more synth-heavy mixes on Silver Seed. Good reminder of the power of synths to hit an emotional note and expressing a desperate sense of distance and loneliness. Or the lighter synth arpeggios going up next to pianos and flutes on tracks like Stargazer, though that cut does really pick up its energy level with a cool, not really acid breakdown near the end. I did really like that bit. And I think probably the strongest emotional note on the album was Pale Blue Dot. That track might be kind of cheating its way into taking that spot by borrowing its piano melodies and chord progressions quite heavily from certain specific moments on Isola, especially the track Yossi and, to a lesser extent, Overdrev. But the much denser full orchestral string and woodwind backing on this track and the way they bounce off some warmer synth textures and electric pianos, while being kinda too pretty for me to resist, I think also give the track just enough of its own feel to not be made completely redundant by his earlier work. I mean, a track like Yossi feels more self-contained and introspective, while this feels more like it's looking up at the vast scale of the universe and contemplating the insignificance of our existence, more suitable for the cosmic tone of this album. While I'm on the topic of tracks that sound like other Rumpistol tracks, by the way, the track Alpha Centauri also sounds like it's directly mirroring a bunch of his older piano cuts, such as, I guess, the title track from After the Flood, or Lazar from Isola minus the dub influences. Though I suppose the intensity of the synth bass and various other synth effects and melodies to accompany it, as well as the live drums ramping up at the end, do still do well to amp up the level of suspensefulness. But yeah, that's everything to go through on Nebula. This album was obviously a ton of fun, and there's not too much for me to complain about here. I thought it was great. Obviously, I'd be lying if I said the album was perfect or anything. I think my specific criticisms of Going Inside are also applicable to this album in some degree. The clear melodic deja vu I get on a couple of tracks is part of that. I wouldn't say the melodies on this album are quite as sharp or memorable as they are on After the Flood or Isola, even if they all easily fit the vibe the album is going for and are still pretty sharp. And also, like Going Inside, I also had a bunch of listens where moments that feel like they should have been bigger highlights than they were kind of fell in the background, such as Stargazer and the title track. Ended up feeling more like they were following a template the album was setting down than being major standouts in their own right. Tracks on this album are still distinct enough to not run together. They all clearly have their own identities when I'm able to sit up and pay attention to them, but some were definitely more striking for me than others. But again, this is mostly just me nitpicking. I don't feel like these criticisms are quite as intrusive to this album as they were to Going Inside, simply because the tone and energy level is so different from his piano trilogy. At the end of the day, I was sold enough on the premise of Rumpistol doing cosmic jazz for these things to not matter that much. This particular instrumental palette of synths and jazz with epic sci-fi space themes is way too well designed to appeal to my tastes directly for me to care that heavily. And even if there were parts that, maybe repeated a familiar formula too closely, at least it was repeating a formula that I already loved hearing from him before. Like I said earlier, I feel like the premise kinda just sells itself without you needing to know the minor details. I've listened to this album at least 7 times over the past 2 weeks, and it's been the kind of listen I didn't really feel like writing about because I was too busy just getting sucked into its cosmic vibes and not thinking too hard about it. I don't see this being my favorite album of the year, but it is properly great, and I can definitely see it getting at least a mention on the year-end list somewhere. As far as semi-bombastic electronic jazz crossovers in 2025, I enjoyed this on a roughly equal level to that Bandler Ching project I covered in the last Some Stuff I Missed roundup, even if that hits on a similar effect from a very different angle. I can comfortably call Nebula the fourth best Rumpistol album to date, behind Isola Dynamo and After the Flood. It's a heck of a cool, daring new development in his sound that I'd be very excited to hear him further evolve or refine later down the line too. And I'm feeling a very light 8.3 out of 10 on it. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.